Mystical Recall presents The Mystical View, The Primer by Vernita Seahrey Sherman. Read by Vernita Seahrey Sherman. Copyright 2024. Expanded Edition. Thank you to my spirit guides Josephine, Eddie, Timar Maxine, Charlie, and those whom I have yet to meet. Thank you, my guardians and friends in other planes that have protected me and assisted with my remembrance. Thank you, Dad and Aunt Bertha, for checking in on me so many times throughout the years and peering in from other dimensions. I love you all. The author of this book does not dispense medical advice or prescribe the use of any technique as a form of treatment for physical, emotional, mental, or medical problems without the advice of a physician or related healthcare professional, either directly or indirectly. The intent of the author is only to offer information of a general nature to help you on your spiritual journey. In the event you use any of the information in this book for yourself, the author and the publisher assume no responsibility for your actions. Introduction. You are not your body. You are a soul made up of spirit that exists in multiple timelines in this right now moment. You have been multiple people of varying species, not just human, and there are multiple versions of the human you that you know yourself to be. These versions of you exist on different planes that run parallel with this plane. Every version of you contributes to your overall soul's experience, and your out-of-body experiences, OBEs, allow for you to view life from your soul's perspective as the multidimensional being that you are. The fact that you have spontaneous OBEs means that you're going through a high-level spiritual awakening to your true nature, and it's time to navigate life from that level. You are incredible. You're living in a reality that does not understand your greatness because people have forgotten who they are beyond their physical body. Your awareness has been exposed to fourth, fifth, and higher dimensional consciousness while your friends, family, and acquaintances are stuck in a third dimensional mindset. Because of that, you may be feeling fear and anxiety about what's happening to you, but I assure you that you will overcome it. I know this because I was once you. I've come a long way since my days of paralyzing fear and anxiety, and now I'm able to navigate multiple planes and dimensions with comfort and ease, and I'm here to support you with doing the same. This book is just the beginning. I call this book The Primer because it is the first of a series of expressions to get you acquainted with the basics of discovering truth from the soul's perspective, which is what I mean by the mystical view. Before you can break free from the mental and emotional traps that have been put in place in this reality to keep you in fear of your otherworldly experiences, you must first know the truth about your origin, your power, and matters of this world from a soul perspective. This resource will help to expand your awareness. The sections in this book flow in a particular order for a reason, so I highly recommend that you read it in the order presented to fully absorb what is being shared in a way where it will make sense. If you don't feel compelled to read every word written in this book, I want to encourage you to at least finish the rest of this introductory section that contains some key points to keep in mind. Here they are. There are different types of OBEs and various ways you leave and come back to your physical body. If you have not yet experienced this variety, you will in time. The spontaneity of your OBEs happen for various reasons due to your connection to other aspects of you as soul that are having their own experiences in other realms. Below are 5 examples of why what's happening could be happening when it happens. 1. You may be in a pyramid or temple going through your initiations. This reality, and the you that you know yourself to be, is a dream, a very lucid one that the version of you in the temple or pyramid is experiencing. Allow yourself to see the clues along the way, dreams within dreams within dreams. 2. You may be Sri Laga, women who see the two worlds. As Sri Laga, you are accustomed to navigating between realms and phasing in and out. 3. You may have been worshipped as a goddess, god in ancient times, and those worshipers are now calling on that aspect of you. Suddenly, your consciousness is transported someplace else that's unfamiliar to the you that you know yourself to be in this reality. Meanwhile, the part of your consciousness that recognizes this life as your home base is left wondering what just happened. 4. You are part of a faction of a benevolent group somewhere within this galaxy that is gathering information from this reality through your consciousness. Then you're being pulled back from time to time for that information to be downloaded to the reality where your crew resides. 5. Your higher self wants to take you on a journey to expose you to something specific that may assist you in this lifetime. Remember, your higher self has a bigger picture view of your life in all realities. One way to communicate a point to you or assist you with memory recall is to expose you to certain scenarios playing out in another reality. You are extremely powerful. All humans are. This modern world is full of people who have forgotten their power due to those who run the show that has programmed the masses to think that tapping into their inner power is something evil. They do this so they can maintain power over the minds of the masses. As a result, when people go through a spiritual awakening and start experiencing life beyond their 5 senses, many freak out, and some to the point of being diagnosed with mental health issues that they really don't have. Those who truly do have some form of mental illness are experiencing being lost between realms. Their consciousness is not fully in one or the other, and their human psyche is not adjusting. Many in the psychiatric community simply pay attention to the brain and what's happening chemically, but are not aware of what causes these chemical imbalances beyond the physical. Yes, trauma, but the trauma is not always from this reality. Another aspect of themselves may be having a very traumatic experience that is also affecting their psyche in this reality. It's extremely important for people to manage their emotions in a healthy way and harmonize their mental and emotional self so that mental illness doesn't occur. It can be a challenge when you feel alone with it all due to not being around people who are like you, which is one of the reasons I created mysticalrecall.com. The 20th century was a time of ignorance, yet many born in the mid part of that century continue to hold on to that ignorance. From suppressive dogmatic religious practices that keep the mind in prison, to horrific rituals invoking nefarious entities disguised as innocent holiday celebrations. And let's not forget the suppression of goddess energy, womb energy, the energy known as feminine energy. This energy is a primary part of your essence, regardless of gender. So to suppress it is to rebuke a powerful aspect of yourself. So many religions today are all about suppressing the mother, womb, feminine, goddess, and honoring patriarchal rule. There are many people within both the baby boomer and silent generations who continue to oversee the suppression. They perpetuate lies and pass misinformation down to their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren without even realizing what they're doing. In their mind, they're the elders and have all the wisdom. And then you have some Gen Xers that act exactly like their parents and continue the tradition of passing down the ignorance to millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha. There is a reason why those traditions are falling apart. Our ancient ancestors knew better, and those of them who are back for another round to play this earthly game are not going to tolerate that ignorance. Many people in older generations living today will continue to say negative things about the younger generations. What many of the quote-unquote elders in our society have yet to realize is that, quote, these kids today, unquote, are old souls who are wise elders from ancient societies that have come back to assist with the ascension process that is occurring right now on this plane in this timeline. Many people dismiss these truths because they have read books and listened to certain people that they've put on a pedestal, and now they think they know everything. They've prided themselves on book knowledge and other research and put it above mystical experiences. There was a time on this planet when people listened to divine information that came through to them directly. People used to also consult oracles, priestesses, or shamans, but here in the United States and many other countries, books and research papers, which are nothing more than another person's opinion and perspective, are the go-to source for knowledge. As I mentioned in Section 8 of this book, don't let other people's opinions overshadow what you know to be true within. In addition to that, don't downplay your own mystical experiences. Many people have placed college and university teachings as the highest form of education. That's a 20th century mistake. Where has that gotten them? Intellectually astute, but spiritually ignorant. In other words, severely programmed and under mental slavery of the system our 20th century ancestors tried so hard to fit into. I want to encourage you to learn how to navigate the system strategically with intellect while using spiritual insight to guide you. The human is an advanced vehicle that our souls use to navigate a physical existence on Earth, in Earth, around Earth, and other planets. Yes, humans exist beyond Earth in many areas within this galaxy. It's not the only vehicle, but it's one of several quote-unquote races of vehicles. Race is not a group based on skin color or ethnicity. It's more closely related to a type of species. The first version of human did not look like we do now, and there was no such thing as gender. Everyone was androgynous. As the cycles of time passed, there have been multiple versions of humans leading up to the way we look now. It's important to know that the human vehicle was created from a mix of various beings that exist within multiple star systems on and in multiple planets. All of these beings did not all work together. Every human doesn't have the same mixture. This is why we have varying characteristics that have absolutely nothing to do with skin color or ethnicity, but have more to do with galactic origin. As for skin color and ethnicity, most of us have experienced being different variants of human. For example, there are old souls today that are in what this world calls a quote-unquote white person's body that used to be quote-unquote black. There are souls in this timeline that are in a quote-unquote black person's body that used to be quote-unquote white. Same soul, different vehicle. The same goes for every other quote-unquote race of human, what people today think of race to be. Most of us have occupied all the various types of human, skin color, ethnicity, gender, etc., in other timelines/lifetimes. Most people just don't remember. Evolution of the soul does not happen by incarnating as the same type of human over and over again. Soul evolution happens when you allow yourself as soul to experience multiple types of human vehicles and vehicles that are not human, such as the beings we were before creating the human being. Since people don't remember other lives they're currently living in other timelines, most have no idea of the level of hypocrisy that's running rampant in this current timeline on this plane when it comes to negativity towards certain types of people. That's why hating another human based on external factors is the same as hating yourself. Making up negative beliefs about people who are a certain skin color, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, etc., is done by those who run this system to keep us distracted and fighting each other so that we're always under their control. We are in a completely new cycle now and have gone way past the times of one race, gender, or type of human controlling everything and being the leaders. Each previous era represented this or that type of human leader in society, and those experiments eventually failed. Among the leaders, a few misused their power and were no longer in harmony with their essence. This caused chaos, and people suffered in many ways. Also, jealousy and envy of great leaders led to more chaos and suffering, especially for the people that were the same gender or skin color as the leaders. Women were the original leaders on this planet. However, it's not about the external factors. It's about the internal, the type of vibrational frequency a person emanates. That is what makes them an excellent leader, especially in our current society of a mix of human variants. We must learn to live with all our external differences in a loving way. It all starts with knowing that you're not your body in the first place. You're a being that's way more powerful than your human makeup. Let go of the distractions and look past the surface. Next, we must tell the truth. One type of human appropriating the discoveries and creations of another type of human and lying about who did what must stop. We all have incredible gifts to contribute to this world, regardless of skin color, ethnicity, or gender. There's no need to steal, lie, and suppress. Seeking revenge on those who have done the above doesn't work either. Doing so is simply maintaining the same low vibrational frequency that was used against you. Also, it's not enough to just talk about the contributions of various humans. We must go deeper than that and uncover soul power. When you truly know who you are from the soul's perspective and know how to tap into your power, no one can have control over you. Your soul power gives you the ability to emanate a vibrational frequency that overrides nefarious energy regardless of your external human makeup. Lastly, I bless you with love. It is my intention to always surround myself with love in every moment and express love to others in the best way I know how. Love is a powerful force. It has been my guide and my protection, so I want to acknowledge love and express it to you. Vernita. Section 1. Life is a mystical game. Wake up to the bigger galactic picture. Most of us have been born with a severe case of amnesia, completely unaware of the soul aspect of ourselves. The real us, soul, is playing a game that could be looked at as the equivalent to a virtual video game. I sometimes call it soul evolution, the journey within. In this analogy, the physical body is the character in the game. The soul is the one holding the game controller, which in this case is the mind. The game didn't start with a physical body on Earth. It evolved to that point. Life in a physical body on Earth is simply one part of the overall game. Imagine playing an adventure video game. If the character in the game gets their feelings hurt, you, as the player, wouldn't take it personally because it's just a game. Your character's feelings were hurt, not yours, and the character isn't even real. Life is just like that. The you that you think you are isn't the real you. The unreal character, the physical body, in the virtual video game world we call Earth, is the one whose feelings were hurt. The real you is simply experiencing what the character is feeling. Since the character is not real, there's no need to let its feelings affect you negatively. In other words, you are not your physical body, so there's no need to allow what happens in the physical world to unpleasantly affect the soul aspect that permeates that body. Side note, the reason I used quotations around the word real is because from a broad universal perspective, everything is real somewhere on some plane of existence. However, From the perspective of what we collectively as humans perceive the word real to mean, the physical body is not the real self. It's just the vehicle in which the real self uses to navigate this reality. Also note that you will see that I spell self with a lowercase s and self with an uppercase s. The distinction is this: lowercase self is the individualized version of uppercase self, such as an individual soul, which is the higher self. And uppercase self is the whole, all, as in the highest self. If this sounds confusing, continue listening and it will become clear. Lastly, whenever you see you spelled with a capital Y and italicized in this book, I am referring to the soul you, the true, real you, as opposed to the physical human you. We are light beings having a physical experience. Look up in the sky at night and see the stars. Now imagine what it would be like for those stars to be hooked up to physical bodies, hooked up in a way where they can experience themselves as people while still experiencing themselves as stars, so the experience is simultaneous. Well, that's us. We're having multiple experiences, both physical and non-physical, all at the same time. Many people are just not aware of their other selves because these other versions of themselves reside in other dimensions, realms, worlds, planes. You can become aware of your other selves by tuning your energy field to higher frequencies. This is what's happening naturally when you have spontaneous out-of-body experiences. More people are beginning to naturally open up to those other frequencies in various ways because we're moving into a new time cycle here on Earth. The process of this transformation started years ago. We're evolving into a different type of human species. For those who can't adjust to that, they'll transition over to another existence, what most people call death in this reality, which is not a bad thing. It's just a transition from one base reality to another. Many people have checked out already. It used to be that you would hear about someone passing every few years or so, but now numerous people are leaving this plane every year. Earth has elevated to a higher frequency, which is why it's imperative that we, as beings living on Earth, think on a higher, more expanded level and manage our emotions. The type of human that we're turning into is more advanced, and you can tell by how the average lifespan is naturally increasing. You can also see the advancement by paying attention to the type of souls that are now incarnating into this world. The rate at which we are evolving as a species on this planet is at a much faster speed than in the 20th century, and we must change how we do things here. Notice how advanced the children are these days compared to when you were growing up. Children being born today are far superior in what they can do at a young age than any generation before them. As they say, every generation is smarter than the one before it. But what I'm talking about is on a whole other level. These children are amazing. It's like they have superpowers, because they do, and so do you. They are seriously connected to their cosmic self, the self that you are from a star's point of view, not an earthly human point of view. Side note, there is a new variant of human that's currently forming simultaneously with our organic evolution, which are people who have had microscopic artificial intelligent technology unknowingly installed into their bloodstream. They will be more advanced than they currently are, but it will be easier for the system to control them due to what has been injected into their bodies. This is just a more modern form of genetic manipulation that many versions of human have experienced throughout multiple cycles of time. The system creates an enemy that evokes fear and then creates a solution to eradicate the enemy. The masses are unaware that the devil and the angel are one and the same. It's a clever way of tricking the masses to willingly embrace the solution. This trickery happened on a mass planetary scale, starting with the events of 2020 and the quote-unquote solution rolling out in 2021. What many people are not aware of is that this type of trickery has been happening for decades in other ways, especially to heavily melanated people. People have been so conditioned by this world that many think they're from here, but we are not from this earth. As light beings, we have played this continuous soul evolution game throughout the universe on many different timelines before what we perceive time to be on Earth. Our experiences are varied. All beings have taken different journeys. We're from multiple star systems and have taken on multiple forms before the human form. And some of us have been human on other planets. The things you see in science fiction, fantasy, and in some cases horror movies, or read about in books, are real. Yes, in many cases these things are exaggerated, but they are indeed real. We have been brainwashed and conditioned to think that it's all make-believe and fiction created for entertainment purposes. The truth is, those movies and books are telling us about our true self and our divine abilities. Some of the writers know this and put what they know in story form so that it's palatable to the modern-day human psyche. The masses will accept it as long as it's presented as fiction, but if these writers were to present their work as fact and nonfiction, the masses would think they were crazy and dismiss their work. Then there are the writers who simply imagine these fantasy worlds, creating various characters with otherworldly abilities, etc. But it's important to keep in mind that everything you can possibly imagine is indeed real somewhere, whether you're aware of it or not. Whatever flows into your imagination flows from our collective essence and does indeed exist on some plane somewhere in this cosmic existence. Many things that people imagine are actually memories of experiences that their soul self has had in other realities. Alternatively, what they imagine could also be memories of another being's experience, human or otherwise, that the person's mind picked up telepathically through our collective consciousness, as we are all connected. What flows into our minds depends on the frequencies we allow ourselves to emit and receive, whether knowingly or unknowingly. You are so much greater than you think you are. Every single savior, messenger, prophet in every religion or spiritual belief told you about your greatness. Those stories were all saying the same thing in a different way, but instead of everyone coming together and understanding the deeper meaning of the allegorical stories and metaphors within them, people chose to fight about whose God or savior was real or not, whose religion is the truth, what's right and what's wrong, etc. People are missing the whole point. All those things are irrelevant because you are not the body, race, nationality, or gender you think you are. Your country, state, city, or neighborhood is not your original home. Look beyond the fishbowl. Again, we are cosmic beings who are having an experience on Earth, period. Once you are in full awareness of this, it will be so much easier for you to see past the lies that the people who control the system of suppression you live in are spoon-feeding you every day. Some people think they're living in a free world, but the system has kept us in mental slavery for thousands of years and has completely suppressed the truth of life outside of Earth. It's like a fish in a fishbowl thinking it's free, until a fish that's experienced swimming in the ocean tells it that oceans exist. What's interesting is when the fish that only knows of the fishbowl argues with the other fish and swears there's no such thing as an ocean. That's like what's happening in this reality right now. Most of the things that we have been taught about life are from the fish in the fishbowl perspective. Throughout the decades, when there have been people who have shared knowledge from beyond the fishbowl, so to speak, people either ignored it, dismissed it, or it wasn't even on their radar. So now when things occur like all of what happened in 2020, or even everything that happened during the years of Trump and then Biden as president, people are shocked. Those who have experienced life beyond the fishbowl are very much aware of the transformation that's occurring. Everything that has happened in the last several years is simply waking you up to the truth that the system never cared about you or the others living within the system. And no amount of voting, protesting, complaining on social media, or using other physical means to bring forth permanent change will work against the type of malevolent, multidimensional forces that are at play. The difference between the last several years and the last few decades or centuries is that everything is now coming to a head. Truth is revealing itself in a more in-your-face type of way, and the controllers of the system are losing their ability to keep the facade up. Every player working for the system is like a piece on a chessboard. None of them can be trusted. In public, many of them pretend to be adversaries, but behind closed doors, they're lifelong friends or associates. On the other hand, some of them are completely unaware of the truth behind the facade because they're perceiving based on the fishbowl point of view too. They are more of the pawns on the board, while the ones in the know are the stronger pieces. Those who run the system, beings that move the pieces on the board, are scrambling to retain their control. So you're witnessing the manipulation of the chess pieces to invoke fear in the masses to get the masses to trust the system in other ways. There is absolutely nothing new about this, except that the masses are beginning to see it for themselves. But there's much more to see than what you've seen so far. When I talk about the system, I'm not just referring to the government, because the government is just a manager of the system. However, since it's one of the biggest managers of the system, I will briefly address it. It's not about Democrat or Republican, this one or that one, because they all work for the same system, two sides of the same entity. If the higher-ranking government leaders had your best interest in mind, they would tell you the truth about life on and in other planets, life inside this planet, teleportation, time travel, galactic affairs, mind control programs, and a whole host of other truths that you will become aware of once you start tapping into your essence and let go of the fear of experiencing life beyond the fishbowl. If they had humanity's best interest in mind, not only would they share the truth, they would also do it while emanating a love frequency. They know the truth and they continue to hide it. Yes, there is truth to some of the things that Trump exposed, but he did not expose it out of love. He shared bits and pieces of truth mixed with lies and exaggerations, so much so that people who didn't like him threw the truth out with the lies. They were so focused on the lies that they couldn't see the parts that were true. People who supported him were only aware of parts of the truth and not the lies, so without the holistic point of view, they came to conclusions that were false. Both sides have been manipulated to go against each other for distraction purposes. His followers were being used just as much as those on the other side that were angry at him. All this distraction is part of the system doing what it does to manipulate the masses. By the way, being a president is not a prestigious part to play in the manipulator's game. They are the lowest ones on the totem pole when it comes to the system. It's an insult position in their world. They know they must be the fall guys while the ones with real power hide in the shadows. Presidents and other high-ranking government officials are also being used by those who created the system. The difference is that they're aware of it and have agreed to participate in exchange for something: power, control, money, etc. Keep in mind that neither Trump nor Biden would have been able to do the things they did if the system did not allow for it to be possible. There are loopholes in all aspects of the system, and they were left there purposely so that when someone like presidents and former presidents need to use them, they can. Also notice how the system loves to pit politicians against each other, where one comes off like a wolf and the other plays the nice guy. We've seen that play out so smoothly. Most people fall for that game until truths are exposed that show how much the nice guy is simply a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's never about the politicians, though. It's always about the agenda of those who created the system. Focus on the puppet master, not the puppet. Although I must say, it's very interesting when the puppet creates his own agenda and doesn't move the way the puppet master wants him to. There have been a few rogue puppets that usually get assassinated, but the current one dodges many bullets, literally and figuratively. Is this current rogue puppet a secret key to much-needed change? The system of control we live in has to do with things that go far beyond the issues we have here on Earth. All issues on Earth are just a smaller version of the broader galactic experience. People on this planet are so distracted by discrimination, wars, and other earthly issues to the point where they're not seeing the bigger galactic picture. But then again, how can one see it if they believe that Earth is the only planet with people and humans are the only upright walking and talking beings that exist? Earth is the baby. Those other planets seeded life and grew thriving civilizations long before Earth did. On top of that, there are a multitude of planets that exist in our solar system alone that we didn't learn about in school. Beings have fought over controlling various planets for hundreds of millions of years in this solar system and outside of this solar system, in the same way that rulers of lands here on Earth have started wars to conquer over other lands and people. Most wars begin because of a greedy ruler of one place that wants to expand their rule over another place for personal reasons. Many people who fight in wars truly do not know what they're fighting for because the rulers or leaders lie so much and hide what's really going on. The leaders justify war by making up stories about how the other leader is doing something nefarious, when the truth is, it was all about greed, obsession with power, playing their part in a bigger agenda for those whom they work for, or some personal issue between leaders, things that have absolutely nothing to do with the best interest of the citizens of the land. On Earth, people fight each other every day over ridiculous things when we really need to come together to protect our planet from nefarious beings that are from other planets and other star systems. Have you ever wondered who owns Earth and if the owners were protecting their asset? Have you ever wondered if Earth was to be left alone and not owned by anyone, but instead looked after by a certain group, but then another group stole it, as in infiltrated and conquered over it, and then claimed it as theirs? How can someone own a planet or steal it? That sounds crazy, right? Well, it's only crazy if you're not aware of galactic communities, federations, and civilizations. Nefarious beings came together with the greedy leaders on this planet and conditioned the masses to believe that they don't even exist. So if people on Earth think that all the stories about these beings are science fiction, fantasy, and crazy lady talk, then people on Earth wouldn't have a reason to protect the planet from others or fight back. That's why they suppress our minds in numerous ways to keep us too unaware to respond. Another important point to note is that many beings from other planets are benevolent and on our side. The problem is that we have been conditioned by the system via movies and media manipulation to think that they're all evil and want to attack us. First, the system didn't want us to know they existed, and now there's the UFO alien attack talk. This is one reason why I always stress the importance of knowing who and what you truly are beyond what you have been conditioned to believe, so that you're not ignorant of what's going on in our galactic community. Without knowing what's happening galactically, you wouldn't fully understand the things that are happening on our Earth right now. If you're always wondering why this or that is happening, you have to look beyond this planet and beyond this dimension to know why. Everything that happens beyond trickles down to the things we see play out here. Who in the highest ranks of government is going to expose the truth in a holistic, loving way and put it all in context so that there is no confusion about what's being shared? And then, who will join them in disclosure of truth? When will any of them allow love of humanity to prevail over greed, power, and control? Maybe the rogue puppet played the wolf to create chaos that was necessary to shake things into place. Just like a bull in a china shop, people would be so focused on the bull breaking up everything, they would completely miss that the bull also caused a door to open that exposed what was hidden in the back room. Either way, truth is being revealed both directly and indirectly in other ways. The question is, will you allow yourself to become aware of it Or will you continue to hold on to the fishbowl point of view? Keep in mind that even when you begin to become aware, your ego may still have its moments of wanting to hold on to the fishbowl mentality because of the doubt that may seep into your psyche. This happens when you've been so conditioned to rely on the system for truth that when the real truth slaps you in the face, you go into denial. The answer to what do we do now is right there inside of every human being, but many people allow their ego to keep them from seeing it. Their ego created an illusionary wall that's made up of all their social conditioning since birth. Once people realize that the wall is an illusion, they can walk right through it and see the truth. People will finally be free, transcending the fishbowl and experiencing a broader state of consciousness to perceive from. From there, they can tap into their inner power and assist humanity with breaking free from the malevolent energies that created the system of suppression. As for you, you will soon see that the more you know the truth of self, the easier it will be to release fear of your out-of-body experiences. From there, you can tap into your power and use it to create a better experience for yourself in this reality. Let go of what you have been conditioned to believe since birth. Let your mind be free and allow your consciousness to be aware of all. As the saying goes, play the game. Don't let the game play you. Section 2. Breaking Free. The Journey Back to Your Highest Self. When I first started out on my journey searching for the truth about life, I didn't know that the road would lead me back to me. What I didn't realize was that what I was searching for were parts of myself that I had lost touch with. These parts are the key to breaking free from mental and emotional traps that cause fear. Once you tap into them, you'll see that you're so much more than who you think you are, and the things you're upset about and have anxiety over are so small compared to the bigger picture of your existence. Don't allow yourself to be trapped by physical perception, because what you see in the mirror is not the real you. As I've said before, the real you is playing a soul evolution game, and being in human form is a phase in your soul's evolution. The object of the game. The point is to align with the divine while in physical form. In other words, unite your lower self with your higher self so you become a full reflection of cosmic consciousness, complete self. Another way of saying it is to reach the level of Christ consciousness while in physical form and express from Christ level consciousness. And here's the last way I'm going to say it: to be a full expression of God's self while in human form. I could go on and on with the various ways of saying this, but it has been said many ways, many times by many different people. The issue is when some people convinced others that this could only be done by a chosen one. Then people started fighting over who the chosen one was and when that person was born, or if they had yet to come. This has resulted in the creation of numerous religions with their own versions of a chosen one, Savior, or Christ. In actuality, the concept and various stories surrounding this concept were teaching you about you. You are the one that you have been searching or waiting for. You become a Christ, which is a title, not one person, when you use your free will to align with the divine and express that consciousness. Even the various versions of the quote-unquote chosen one told you this. Side note, reaching this level of being is not about what you say or do. It's much deeper than your human self. There is a merger that occurs on an etheric level, a non-physical level. And when this happens, you as a soul represent this consciousness in every incarnation thereafter if you choose to. And yes, most of the souls who have reached this level of consciousness are asleep to it when they initially incarnate in this reality. They go through certain situations in life that triggers their awakening. For them not to initially remember who they are is not the case in every reality. However, loss of memory of self is part of the current cycle that we have lived in on this plane for hundreds of thousands of years. Every savior or enlightened one in every religion shared with you how to be the divine being you are, the all, expressing this level of consciousness while in human form. Whether you believe in Jesus, Yeshua, Krishna, Buddha, or any of the others mentioned in various religious texts, the same underlying message was shared. It was nefarious beings, manipulated humans, and humans that wanted power and control over the masses who were the ones that originally taught otherwise. False teachers twisted everything up. The original false teachers who had people believing there is only one Christ or enlightened one knew the truth and kept it to themselves. They did this because they knew if people were aware of their divine essence and ability to merge with that essence, then people wouldn't be able to be controlled. Things became worse when loving people who have humanity's best interest in mind started believing the false teachings and became teachers of that false work. The false teachers were very clever at manipulation, so much so that if anyone taught anything differently, teachers of truth, they were believed to be the false ones. They were considered blasphemous and accused of doing, quote-unquote, the devil's work. Conquerors and rulers of various lands wanted to have power over the masses, and one way to gain power and control over powerful souls is to control the mind by lying and having people think that they're not powerful and don't have certain abilities. One of the biggest lies is to say that God's word is limited to one book. That is true, quote-unquote, blasphemy. There are no limits to the source from which we all come from. God communicates through vibrational frequencies, and those vibrations manifest in this reality as sounds, shapes, images, and colors. People have interpreted vibrations with numbers and words. It is the word of man that states that his words have been inspired by God. It is the word of man that has determined which texts to show the masses and which texts to hide. It is the word of man that states to not question the compiled text because it is, quote-unquote, God's word. It is the word of man in the beginning of patriarchal societies that began using male pronouns to refer to God, i.e., he, his, him, and to not acknowledge goddess essence, the primary aspect of creator that gives birth to light. It is the word of man that taught people to interpret ancient texts in a literal way, completely ignoring the metaphors in the allegorical stories that womb man, woman, passed down orally from ancient times. There is no loving God that would ever put limitations on creation. Only physical beings do that to have control over the minds of other physical beings. Numerous ancient texts have been written to explain what society calls God's word. Conquerors of lands ordered holy men of those lands to compile these texts and create books from them. Councils were formed to discuss which text would be canonical and what would not. In other words, men determined what was the word of God and what was not. Their conclusions were based on laws that the new ruler of the land wanted to enforce. It was not based on divine inspiration. It was all part of the system of suppression. Many people only look at the government, but the government is not the only manager of the system. If you find that all hard to believe and want to rely on written words for truth, then at the very least, read the ancient texts that the rulers ordered to be taken out of the one book, and read the ancient texts that the supposed holy men did not originally include at all. Then read the history of the various conquerors and the lands they conquered while slaughtering people who didn't conform to the belief system they wanted people to live by. If you're wondering why I didn't just come out and say the Bible or the Holy Bible, it's because that's not the only book that I'm referring to. There are other writings in other religions that are referred to as God's word. They just use a different word for God. When you rely on written text for truth, you allow yourself to be susceptible to manipulation, especially when you're not fluent in the original written language of the text or the way in which people in that particular culture spoke figuratively. In addition to that, even if you were fluent in the language of the original text, remember that the text was written from the conqueror's point of view. If people were able to get the point of view of those who were killed, raped, enslaved, oppressed, and suppressed by the conqueror and his men, they wouldn't be so quick to believe the conqueror's word over those of the people that were conquered. All of that is still going on today, but in a more modern way, such as through the use of technology. Television programming and radio programs came into play and became much easier to influence the mind than the spelling within books. And now in the 21st century, advanced digital technology has made it easier for the masses to be programmed without looking at a TV screen or listening to the frequencies emitted from a radio. The frequencies emitted in all digital devices that are commonplace in most households today, or what's in your pocket or purse, allow the masses to be programmed quicker and on a much larger scale than ever before. Plus, we still have all the old school ways of being programmed as well: TV, radio, books, etc. And let's not sleep on nanites and other microscopic technology being injected into people and their favorite pets. Brainwashing and mind control in ways in which the masses are not aware is a way to keep you from knowing your true self so that those who control this reality can sustain their power over you. But as I said before, we're in a new time, a new cycle, so those days are coming to an end for some. Many people are waking up to the truth of self. The question is, how much longer will it take for enough people to wake up and emanate a frequency powerful enough to override the mind control that's happening to our collective consciousness so that this new cycle is one that is beneficial to all of humanity? Finding self. You may not have thought you had a self to find or lose, so you didn't look for it or hold on to what you already had. As they say, you don't know what you don't know. I prefer to say that you're not aware that there is something to be aware of. I say it in that way because from a more expanded viewpoint, your essence is all-knowing. Self is your essence, the all. All/self has expressed in many ways, and all those ways are like pieces or aspects of self, and each aspect is a self that is part of the whole self. To look or find is just another way of saying that you must expand your awareness of who you are as a whole, to make aspects of you that you're unconscious of part of what you're conscious of. It's all about awareness, being aware of all aspects of self, remembering your essence, gaining back the memory that you lost. To remember is to bring the parts of self that you are not aware of back into your awareness. Once those parts are in your awareness, you can tap into them and recall the information that they contain that will assist you in navigating this reality with power. The real you, soul, has always communicated with all parts of you and never gave up on all parts of you. For example, every time you get that gut feeling, that's the real you attempting to get your attention. Your, as in your conditioned ego you. Dismiss what your conditioned mind is saying and follow that inner knowing. The more you follow it, the more messages you will begin to receive in various ways. On top of that, your conditioned mind, ego, can only come into harmony when the highest aspects of you are guiding it. When you first find yourself, you may or may not notice that it's not all you. You may have just become aware of, a few pieces that are part of the life force that keeps you alive. So what you really found was only part of self. So don't stop. You must continue to look for, become aware of, those other parts. As for how you lost awareness of all this to begin with, remember you were born into this reality with a case of amnesia to who you really are. Even though you don't remember all of yourself when you are born, you're still born with a little more awareness each time you come back to live another life from a linear point of view. You're a little more aware each time because you have evolved due to all of your experiences since the previous perceived linear times. This happens when you have allowed yourself to learn from your experiences, apply what you've learned, and gain more spiritual power during each life. The more of these lessons you learn, which is knowledge that has been gained, and apply, applied knowledge, and the more spiritual power you attain, wisdom as it relates to applied knowledge of self, the more you're ready to move on to the next level in the game. So, when you reincarnate, you start on the next level up from the one you completed in your previous perceived linear version of incarnation. You keep coming back until you reach the highest level of the game, Christ consciousness, and not just reach it, but also express it. Some people who come back have already done that. They just incarnate to help others who are having a challenging time evolving and moving on, or for other reasons that are related to galactic affairs, or just simply because they like playing the game of remembrance. Side note, be aware that when you come back to live another life on Earth, you're not always the same type of human that you were before, meaning the color of your skin, your nationality, your gender, etc., will be different in some lifetimes. A soul does not have a complete human experience by always having the same exact physical characteristics in each life, which is why you choose a different physical makeup. People who are racist and sexist are truly being hateful towards themselves, not just from a broader perspective that we all are connected, but also from the perspective of the different types of human they have been in multiple lifetimes. Many racist white people have been Black, and many Black people who want to wipe white people off the earth have not only been white, but have been an oppressive slave owner or killer of indigenous people. When you allow for yourself to tap into your essence to the point of knowing who you've been in other lifetimes, you become filled with love and compassion. You'll see how it makes no sense to have a problem with another human being because of the color of their skin or any other external factors. There are some souls that start off on the same level of this game over and over again at each incarnation. That's a choice based on whatever agenda they've set for themselves before incarnating. Keep in mind that there's no laws that make what I've mentioned in the last few paragraphs the absolute truth. You can enter into any reality when you're tapped into wholeness, your essence, where all power comes from. You don't have to incarnate back into this plane unless you choose to. You, as a soul, know the reasons for whichever choice is made. Side note, it's important to be aware that you, as a soul, experience multiple reincarnations simultaneously, including multiple incarnations as the person you are now. Yes, I am indeed saying that not only are you other people right now, but there are multiple versions of the person you are now, existing in other planes. There is more to deja vu than you think. Time is now on multiple frequencies of now, not past, present, future. I always encourage people to tap into their essence so that they can tap into other frequencies that will allow them to experience visiting multiple realities using their etheric body, or allowing their consciousness to travel so that they can see the truth of all of this. You're already tapped in and having these experiences. Once you overcome your fear and become comfortable with being exposed to multiple realities beyond this physical world, more truth about life will be revealed. So again, each time you incarnate, you're a little more aware of self than the time before, which is why some people are exposed to otherworldly experiences at a young age. But as you know, just because you have certain experiences doesn't mean you're in full awareness of why or how. This means that there are parts of you that are still asleep to who you truly are. It's like having amnesia to who you are, yet still being able to unconsciously tap into your abilities. And with some people, they don't really remember how to do certain things willfully. Those things just seem to happen spontaneously. So in this case, only a percentage of will is being used. Now for me, I started to wake up to the awareness of more aspects of will when I began to pay more attention to the intuitive side of myself. Like I shared before, the higher part of yourself, soul, is always communicating with you, lower part, in many ways, And one of those ways is that feeling you get when you just know. You don't know how you know, but you know. So along with me listening more to that part of self, I also started to clear my mind a bit by not overanalyzing. In the moments when I didn't overanalyze, I noticed that I could hear that inner voice more clearly. I mean this figuratively, yet in some cases, I could literally hear, as I am very much clairaudient. I spent so many years trying to find the truth instead of letting the truth come to me, which it did once I stopped searching so hard outside of self. Even when you start to wake up to who you really are from the soul's perspective, the reason you may only be aware of just a few parts of self and not all of self is because you haven't allowed yourself to become the master of your emotions yet. If you've ever had a traumatic experience in your life or perceived, quote unquote, hard times that had you in the quote unquote depths of despair, then mastering your emotions may be a challenge. However, because you're more awake now, you have access to more willpower to take control of your ego and master your emotional self. One of the keys to being aware of more aspects of self, part of the going within process, is to harmonize your emotions. The more emotions you can harmonize, and the more moments you're able to stay in the state of harmony, the more parts of self will come into your awareness. Once you're conscious of the things that you're able to do, it's up to you to take the initiative to tap into the power that each part of self brings. You must train yourself, lower self, to use that power, which happens through merging the lower self with the higher self. Section 3. The Nature of Consciousness. Navigating the Depths of Soul, Spirit, and Creation. Many people are confusing themselves over the difference between soul and spirit and what's what. Many use the two words interchangeably, and others say that there's a difference between the two. Some people even believe that there's no such thing as soul, that there's only spirit. What I'm going to do is define soul and spirit from my perspective. It's my intention that the way in which I convey my point of view will allow you to see a more holistic view of the two, which is really one. Spirit is our essence. Our essence created soul in order to experience the created worlds of time and separation. You as soul are a non-physical form that has various experiences in multiple worlds within time and separation constructs while still maintaining a connection to your essence, spirit. So soul and spirit are integrated as one. Soul is made up of spirit in the way that ice is made up of water. Soul is to ice as spirit is to water. It is spirit that has taken form. Now let's take it a step further. Soul is made up of many parts. Each part is an expression of spirit's experiences within a cycle, what we as humans call a lifetime. Some of these parts incarnate, integrate with physical forms, while others remain free of incarnation as light forms. Soul is spirit's memory of experiences that are measured throughout the concept of time. Soul is the non-physical you within time that is sending information to spirit, which is your non-physical essence outside of time. From spirit's perspective, time is not real, but time was created in order for spirit to experience what it would be like to separate itself and navigate as denser forms that play a game of remembering who it is. As mentioned in the beginning of this book, life is a game. Yes, time and separation are an illusion, but not to the version of self that is within the game. Soul evolution is becoming a master of time and overcoming thoughts of duality. The next level is when you're ready to stop playing a game within the constructs of time and separation, which is played by many beings, not just humans, and go back to oneness. At that point, you're not evolving, you're simply being. Without time and separation, there's nothing to evolve. Now let's take it even further. As spirit, which is pure consciousness or light outside of worlds within time constructs, you do not need a soul. You are what you are. You are a soulless being outside of time. You are essence and expressed as oneness. This soulless way of being should not be confused with a soulless being within time that has no connection to essence, oneness, spirit. Got it? Let's go further. Consciousness is an aspect of spirit that is like the mind. So, in essence, consciousness is the mind of spirit, and the mind of spirit is comprised of will, which is clear intention, concentrated thought. Love is like the glue that holds all together. At the highest level of existence, everything is one. Soul, spirit, will, and consciousness, love, thoughts, emotions, and other aspects we give labels to are all one. That oneness has been called Goddess, God, Universal Creator, Source, Universe, the Divine, the All, Spirit, and more. Where it may start to get confusing is when all that there is, Goddess or God, Universal Creator, Source, the Divine, etc., perceived itself, its self or self, and then put forth intent to create form. Different aspects of spirit's consciousness, the mind of spirit, are responsible for different parts of the creation process. For example, the part of consciousness that puts forth the intent to create something comes from will. Spirit can take on any form, but not all forms contain awareness of itself in the same way in which we are aware of ourselves as living beings. There is a such thing as spirit taking form but not having a soul. These are the soulless beings that navigate within constructs of time and separation that have broken away from the glue that holds all aspects of spirit together, which is love. They have no sense of the aspect of spirit that is the breath of life. Without soul, there is no integration with spirit. They are like lifeless drones. Think artificial intelligence, AI. The question is, did they purposely break away from the glue of love, or did a creator being, that is a soul, create them to be disconnected from spirit, soulless, in the first place? Either way, why? I don't have a true answer for that. I just have my beliefs. As for us humans, we are very powerful and special, although many in this reality have not come to that awareness yet. It is a privilege for us as souls to occupy such an advanced expression of self to navigate this physical reality. Humans are literally a culmination of all advanced aspects of self in a very dense form. All we need to do is merge with our higher, expanded self to actualize cosmic consciousness or Christ consciousness while expressing in this dense form so we can create a more loving world without being under mind control and mental slavery from those that currently run this reality. There was a time when we were already like that, but we lost our way due to many factors that have been expressed in many ways in ancient texts and mythologies, so much so that people are not aware of the truth of what happened. We came from blackness. Spirit, self, source, all, the divine, creator, goddess, God, is like a big ball of powerful, infinite, conscious energy that is the source of all vibrations. When vibrations are expressed, they give off colors and sounds. They also form shapes and can be further expressed with numbers. Numbers are like the language that interprets vibration. As humans, when we see all vibrational frequencies combined, the same as all colors, light combined, we see what we call black. This black light is the essence of all before all expressed itself. When all expressed all of itself, emanated light, that expression is viewed physically as white light. White light is all light frequencies emanated or expressed. So yes, white light is the full expression of black light. Black light is the origin of all light. Of course, in this reality, we don't say black light, we say darkness. Either way, it's the same thing. The problem in this reality is that someone somewhere in our perceived past began associating darkness with evil, and that couldn't be further from the truth. It's unfortunate that the word now has such a negative connotation. White light is the first full creation that came from darkness, blackness. It's the first full expression of conscious awareness outside of self. In other words, when darkness is not expressed, it cannot see itself or experience itself outside of itself. It only experiences from the inside out and not the outside in. When it expresses itself, then there's an aspect of it that views and experiences itself outside of itself. So at that point, it sees and experiences inside out and outside in. So now that Source is aware of itself from an outside in point of view, next is taking that light, outside awareness, and creating form. When Source decided that it wanted to know what it was like to experience itself, it divided itself into numerous different forms of light. That's why we say, quote unquote, light being. Not all created forms are of all light frequencies. Remember, white light is an emanation of all the frequencies from blackness, but not all of creation came from white light. Also, white light experiences from the outside in, which means it's only experiencing from one of two primary points of view. Black light is experiencing from the inside out, which means it's only experiencing from one point of view as well. The most complete creation is one in which that creation can experience or see from both primary points of view, dark and light, in and out. One without the other is a limited experience. A powerful species often goes through their transformation process in darkness, absorbing all the potent frequencies as they are nurtured. When ready, they come out into what we call light. An example of this is babies in their mother's wombs, where it's dark, that are then birthed into this reality, light. Another example is when a caterpillar is in a cocoon going through a transformation process, then coming out into the light as a beautiful butterfly. So, when you see all 360 degrees of something, you think you're seeing it all, but really, you're only seeing all of one of the two primary points of view. With all that said, here's an important point to keep in mind. You do not want to stay in darkness too long, because that is a constricting energy. It absorbs unto itself. There is absolutely nothing positive about holding in and restricting your expression for long periods of time. Being in the dark for too long produces ignorance and degeneration. It's extremely important to come out into the light where all frequencies can be fully expressed and harmonized. Imagine the caterpillar or baby that never came out of the darkness. The being would degenerate and die. You see, darkness is only what we perceive as bad when it never allows for itself to express or emanate the light from within itself. Shadow beings and low vibrational beings are of the dark only and will not come out into the light. They're constricting frequencies and will not allow for frequency emanation. As for the light, various types of light beings have created many different forms or versions of themselves. The denser the light, the more physical the form. These forms were made up of various frequencies and different levels of will. Some have what we know of as free will, and others have a will that is based more on how they're programmed to be. They're not really free to choose their nature, such as beings that were not created from a full spectrum of light frequency. Keep in mind that these various forms are still being made right now at this moment. Creation never stops. It is continuous. A note on free will. We are free to tap into all aspects of will and choose how we want to be, as well as create whatever we want to create. That is what our free will is all about. This is how you can consciously create your own reality. Our will is not separate from God's will because there's only one will. In other words, from a soul perspective, there's no such thing as your will and God's will. There is just will. The thing is, you're only aware of a small part of will when you're born. It's up to you to expand your awareness of all of it. Some life forms, beings, or whatever term you want to use, are limited in the amount of will they have access to or are able to perceive because they were made that way. Section 4. Uncovering Humanity's Hidden Origin and Divine Matriarchal Ancestry. Light beings have created and permeated many denser forms of light that we know as matter. At some point, they decided to create a dense form that was a culmination of all aspects of the advanced beings in existence. Basically, a creative mixture of beings from all parts of the animal and plant kingdoms and other intelligent creatures. This is where the human being or human-like being came into play. Light beings wanted to know what it was like to permeate this type of combination being that has full level of consciousness, awareness of self, and full will, ability to freely put forth intention to create at the highest level. There are many enlightened beings that have a high level of awareness of self, but don't have free will and are not the combination of the best, so to speak. When you think about reptilians, aquatic beings, and so many other types of highly intelligent, denser form beings, they only represent a few species in their physical makeup. Human-like beings are comprised of a multitude of different species all combined into one. There were numerous types of human-like beings that were created and seated on and in many planets within our galaxy. This includes our solar system and other star systems within the Milky Way. So yes, human-like beings existed on other planets long before the types of humans we are today existed on Earth. The reason I say human-like is because they all have some inner and outer differences that would slightly stand out compared to how we look today, but they look very much like we do in many ways. Earth humans, Earthlings. The beginnings of us humans here on Earth go back hundreds of thousands to millions of years, and there were so many versions that didn't look like we do today. Just like the other human-like beings, humans on Earth were created by beings from other star systems within our galaxy that had different forms. They were not only intelligent, they also knew high-level sciences that would put scientists in this reality to shame. Some people think they were all reptilian, but that was not the case. There were many dense form beings that took part in what was basically a science project. Some of the versions of human were intentional and created out of love, and some were manipulated by other beings that were not part of the project. It was like when someone steals something from you and reprograms it their way to suit their agenda. There were earlier versions of us humans that were fully aware of all aspects of self, which means they perceived from the soul's perspective. This version did not experience an amnesia-like state when coming into this world. Also, this version was more true to the likeness of self when it comes to gender. In other words, there was no gender. This earlier form was androgynous, both in appearance and internally. Then there was a need for these beings to reproduce on their own, so there needed to be a womb to nurture the seed. This first step-down version from androgynous human being was a womb man, the original version of what we now call woman. This version was different than a current woman because she had a way of reproducing without the need of fertilizer from what we now call a man. The womb man, woman, came long before the concept of a man. The man is a stepped-down version of a being that came from the woman. Without a man, where did the fertilizer come from, and how did it get into a woman? Remember, the original human was androgynous and most likely had internal organs of what we now consider male and female, like an intersex person who used to be called a quote-unquote hermaphrodite. Self-fertilization or autogamy is a thing within the plant kingdom, so it would make sense that attempts of getting a woman to fertilize her own egg would most definitely be possible by following the flowering plant blueprint, but with a slight twist. They experimented with us in many ways. Parthenogenesis was a thing, and probably still is, somewhere amongst humans who haven't been suppressed and are still using glands that don't work the same in the modern-day woman. Since there were many iterations of the original human-like androgynous beings, gender variations exist beyond just female and male. Gender is really a spectrum, not simply female or male. Most things in life are within a spectrum, and not just one or the other of something. Just like with light, it's not just black or white. There's a full light spectrum of multiple colors that represent different frequencies. We have the free will to express whatever frequency of source we want to express when it comes to gender, sexuality, skin color, etc. The creation of humanity and how we as souls express ourselves through that creation is an ongoing experiment as humans continue to evolve as a species on Earth. Our natural evolution was halted many times due to being tampered with by so many beings outside of Earth. In this current timeline, our collective consciousness is at a kindergarten level, or third grade at best, compared to humans and human-like beings that don't live on the surface of Earth. Note, there are many individuals on Earth that have a much higher level of consciousness than that. It's just that as a collective, we have some work to do. This is what chaotic beings that are not of love did to the human vehicle. Everyone has their own name for this type of expression of self: devil, demon, low vibrational entities, etc. But what many people don't realize is that it's all energy that's in a certain state of consciousness, not a separate being in the depths of a quote-unquote fiery hell somewhere. We are all one. There is nothing outside of self. Everything comes from one source. It's just a matter of the type of frequency that is being emitted from an individual aspect of the one. And then there are aspects that don't want to emit any frequency. They're also like vacuums that absorb and pull in all frequencies they encounter. These are the dark beings that suck you dry of your energy and are not of emitted light. One point to keep in mind is that the beings that created humans, the ones that contributed to the project, and the ones that manipulated and tampered with humans, both the benevolent and malevolent ones, are us, not the human us, but other soul parts. You are a light being that has taken many light and dense forms on many planets within many star systems, within and outside of our galaxy. How many planets, star systems, and galaxies you have experienced living in depends on your specific soul's journey. All of us as souls have different roles we've played in this game of life before even becoming human. You may or may not have been part of the creators of the human body, but you were participating in some form of creation when you were in other realities. So, the idea of being afraid of some aliens somewhere out there is nothing more than you being afraid of you. And if you don't believe there's a you out there in other places outside of Earth, as human or as another type of being, you're simply not aware of all of you. So, what's the difference between someone who's our current version of human versus someone who isn't, but is taking on a human form like a mask? Answer: being birthed through the womb of a woman. Those of us who have gone through the process of gestation in a woman's womb are genuine humans. We, as souls, permeate a human body that we're naturally and organically connected to. Those who have come into this reality by some other means and took on the mask of human form are not true humans. They're not permeating a human body that they're naturally and organically connected to. They're masking their true form. And yes, these people do indeed exist. That said, just because a being is not truly human does not mean that it's evil. Just like with any species in existence expressing itself in duality dimensions, you have the perceived good and the perceived bad. As stated before, there are non-human versions of some of us on other planets in this galaxy, planets that our human selves in this reality did not learn about in school. There are versions of some of us inside planets and between planetary grid lines as well. What I'm sharing with you is what I've consciously experienced as an interdimensional traveler, while at the same time being this current version of Vernita. I've also been exposed to telepathic communication or downloads, clairaudient hearing, and visions. That's how I know what I know. These experiences can be so much fun after you let go of fear and anxiety and embrace your true nature. You are truly a multidimensional being that has taken on many forms in many realities, whether you are aware of it or not. Again, you're more than human, but even the human you are so much greater than you're perceiving right now. Each one of us are a mini-me of the divine source that has taken physical form. There is no separation between God's spirit and will and our own because God is all that there is. We've just limited ourselves because many of us are not in full awareness of who we are. And when we find out, it takes time for some of us to recall how to fully use our abilities. And this is only because we initially have doubt. Know that you are a divine being, an extension of source energy. You are God's mini-me. A note about Mu, Lemuria, and other places of Earth. It's important that you expand your awareness of your human lineage on, in, and around Earth back before there was a such thing as Africa. The land now known as Africa is not the motherland. To limit yourself to this land is to limit who you truly are, which takes away from your power. There was a time when the water levels on Earth were hundreds to thousands of feet lower than they are now, so there are many more discoveries to be made. The truth is deep in the oceans. This means that when you look at the Earth from an aerial view today, there is significantly more water covering it than there was hundreds of thousands of years ago. Also, water has shifted to places where it didn't used to be. The surface of Earth was one big piece of land, a Pangea, before breaking apart into what we now know as continents. In some cases, it didn't break apart. The water covering it gives the illusion of separation. Humans were all over this land long before history was recorded. This was long before the flood that you hear about in religious stories in ancient texts. Keep in mind that there was actually more than one flood. The land on Earth's surface was known as Mu or Lemuria, depending on the time period. Humans also exist in the following areas of Earth. There's a place called the X spot, a couple of thousand years into our future. This place is an area around the Earth that we now consider Earth's atmosphere, and people get there by teleporting. Yes, I've been there, and that's what they told me when I asked how do people get there. Next, around or between the grid lines in the sky. Sounds crazy, but people are actually in spaces in the sky. There are shapeshifters there too, bird-looking beings that are blue that shift into human form. One of them was mean-mugging me, and I still don't know why. He was a black man initially, while looking at me all mean and staring me down, then his face shifted into a bird type of being. I only saw his face as he was sitting behind a desk. Next, in gaps on Earth known as wells. I'm unsure of the spelling since this was communicated to me verbally when I was there. Next, inner Earth, known as the inside. Inner Earth is vast and very diverse in so many ways. You have to travel through dimensions to get there. However, from a third dimensional point of view, it's where all of Earth is still connected deep under the water we see on the surface. One thing to note is that the people in the middle part of Earth, inner Earth closer to the core, remember, this is in another dimension, said to me that Earth was destroyed, then recreated. They were very nonchalant about it as if that's a common occurrence. I was told this during a time when I was there and came across items left over after some sort of destruction on the surface. One item had the logo of a well-known communications company that exists today, which leads me to believe that I was in a future time or simply a different timeline. When I asked what happened to the outer part of Earth's surface, a woman mentioned the way people are today, something about, quote unquote, grunt pilgrims. It's not in my awareness if humans were always in the places I mentioned above, except for inner Earth. This is a multidimensional area that has always been in existence within Earth, and there are a multitude of various types of humans there, including different skin colors like we have on the surface today. As for the surface, what we now know as Africa came hundreds of thousands of years after Mu. Mu or Lemuria is the true motherland. Many African spiritual practices and ancient traditions are simply a continuation of what was being practiced back in the days of Mu or Lemuria. It's important to note that not all souls that permeated a human body incarnated on Earth during the time of Mu or Lemuria. As I stated before, we all have different soul journeys and came to this planet in different cycles of time. Some people only focus on certain parts of the planet because, from a soul perspective, their human experience doesn't go back further than that. However, just because their soul's journey on this planet didn't start during ancient times doesn't mean that's the case for everyone else. Regardless of when your first incarnation was here, it's important to know the human origin that has been hidden from you so that you have a big picture view of the reasons behind certain situations occurring during human existence that affect your life on this plane. It's especially important for melanin-dominant people who live in the United States in the 21st century to know and understand that being aware of your earthly lineage provides a gateway to discovering the missing pieces that give you the power to shift your circumstances on the land you were originally found on, not brought to. The descendants of colonizers who want to maintain power over you will continue to perpetuate the lie that all Black or melanin-dominant people are from Africa, so that you don't know about other pieces of land you're indigenous or native to, especially Turtle Island, North America. And yes, we were on the land we now know as the United States before the African Moors came here. The people of Mu, Lemuria, traveled all over this planet long before recorded history and before some of the creation stories that are taught in various religions. Side note, most creation stories are based on truth, even though they contradict each other. Most of the truth can be found in the metaphors, not the literal meanings, and there's more to the truth than what has been told. There are multiple versions of a quote-unquote beginning of time because of the multiple versions of human, the multiple earthly planes, and the multiple timelines that exist simultaneously. The varying creation stories are referring to a specific era or cycle of time within a particular timeline, which all run parallel with each other. Our current version of human has a hard time understanding this because we've been so conditioned to believe that time is linear, that there's no human existence outside of the surface of Earth, and that humans always looked and acted like we do now. Those who run this current timeline system are masters at hiding the existence of Atlantis, Lemuria, inner Earth, Mars, before time was time, and galactic civilizations. Take note that it doesn't matter what race, skin color, or ethnicity you are now. If the soul of you permeated a human body on Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago before Atlantis, then you lived on Mu or Lemuria. Back in the days of Mu, Lemuria, we were in full knowingness that we are multidimensional beings that experience life in many forms and came from many star systems. Society was matriarchal, and there was no suppression of divine feminine, goddess energy. The primary way in which our ancestors passed information to each other was oral or telepathic. There was no need for a writing system. such as the patriarchal writing and language systems we are so accustomed to using today. This means that if you only rely on researched information as proof that something exists or has existed in our perceived past, then there's significantly more truth about your origin that's not yet in your awareness. There are millions of years of information about Earth and its inhabitants that's not in written form, which is most likely why people don't believe Mu or Lemuria existed. What's not written down can be easily hidden, but what is written can be easily manipulated, which is why written information is never complete. To receive information in its complete form is to 1. Receive it telepathically, where language cannot distort the essence of it, or 2. Be exposed to it outside of the physical body, where your physical eyes, which are easily tricked, can't be deceived since you don't use those eyes while navigating spiritual realms. Section 5. Liberating yourself from society's grip. Embracing your unconditional self. From the day we were born into this world, people have been teaching us how to be and what to believe in. Eventually, our minds became so conditioned to their ways that we forgot what it was like to make decisions without the influence of another person's beliefs. Even though we intuitively knew that some of the things that people throughout our life have taught us did not add up, including parents and teachers, we still continue to allow ourselves to stay conditioned and trapped by accepting their opinions and points of view as our truth. Believing in things that were forced on you as being the right way or what a person is supposed to do is a primary cause of mental and emotional traps. Many people are internally fighting with themselves because of their conditioning, whether they consciously know it or not. Their soul is saying one thing to them, while their conditioned mind, better known as ego, is saying another, and they've been conditioned to follow ego instead of soul. Ask yourself these two important questions. 1. Why do I believe what I believe? 2. Why do I accept these beliefs as my truth? Find out where the people that taught you right and wrong, good and bad, acceptable and unacceptable received their information, and why do they accept the information as their truth? If a belief was something your parents taught you, where did they learn it? If a belief was something you learned in school, where did the teacher get their information from? Where did they learn it? If a belief was something that you read in a book, who wrote the book and where did the author get their information from? If you don't go back to the original source of the information, then you'll only be left with interpretations, opinions, point of views, perspectives, and perceptions. Ask yourself, what makes one person's perspective more valid than another person's? More importantly, what makes anyone's perspective more valid or credible than your own? When you rely on another person's point of view, you're limiting yourself and opening yourself up to manipulation. Another person's perspective is good to use as clues that can lead you to the source, but to rely and depend on them as fact without doing your own research is how you limit yourself. This can put you on a path that leads to a mental trap, and eventually you start feeling some type of way about it, causing your emotions to be chaotic. That's why it's important to question everything that you've been taught to believe. Where did it all come from and why? Break free from mental traps by allowing yourself to be an unconditioned adult. When you were a baby and then a toddler, you knew how you felt about things in this reality. Your mind hadn't been fully conditioned yet, so you explored life without limitations. You learned from experiencing and just being. As time went on, you were taught exactly how to behave, and you learned the word no and the phrase don't do that. Many of the things you learned as a little child may have been based on someone telling you, because I said so, and you weren't given an explanation of the real why behind it all. Eventually, when you started to feel a certain way, it was based on your conditioned mind of how you were raised to be, instead of feelings being more innate and real like they used to be. Before your mind became conditioned by others, it didn't compare society's version of right and wrong because it hadn't learned it yet. Remember that there was a you before anyone taught you anything, and before a personality had developed. That version of you was never in a mental or emotional trap. That you either laughed or cried, and when you cried, you always went back to laughing without worrying or dwelling on what made you cry. Think about how babies are. That you experienced every moment without feeling stressed, worried, depressed, or angry for long periods of time. That you didn't experience or weren't even aware of such a thing as regret. You were just enjoying the experience of living in the moment. You can be you again if you allow you to be. Have the experienced adult self merge with the unconditioned child self to produce a newly transformed self that is guided by the real you and not the ego-driven you that your conditioned mind created. It's important to stay true to yourself by allowing you to be you at all times and not allowing anyone's version of truth keep you in a mental and emotional storm. Allow your soul to be your inner search engine. In today's time, most people do their research online and quote-unquote Google it or get answers from social media, online groups, forums, chatbots like ChatGPT, etc. There's a great deal of excellent information that can be found online and plenty of resources. However, you're just led to the source of another person's opinion, belief, or theory. Even if they're the originator of a concept and can prove their theory, you still would be relying on their point of view. And even if you could see from their point of view, you'll still be relying on how they perceive from that perspective. Everyone perceives things differently, even if they all are looking at the exact same thing at the same time. No one's perception is better than your own, but you will not be able to perceive anything if you're not viewing the thing yourself and allowing yourself to form your own conclusion instead of preaching about someone else's conclusion, which was based on what they saw. Check out the picture below, which can be found on page 52 of this book. The above image is an excellent example of how things are based on perspective and perception from that perspective. That's why you cannot accept what you've been taught as your truth, because truth is based on how you perceive things to be. The most powerful and effective research you could ever do is inner research. Allow yourself to be the source of your own truth. That's what soul searching is all about. Your soul is more powerful than Google, YouTube, or ChatGPT, so let it be your main search engine. It will guide you, ego, lower self, to people, books, online information, etc. that resonate with you, soul self, and will lead you further into a deeper understanding of truth. Consult with the soul before using the mind. If you go digging for truth or facts on something without consulting with your soul self first, your mind will become overwhelmed with information and you'll try to figure out right from wrong. Your mind will start to analyze everything and form an opinion based on reason instead of intuitive knowing. Then your heart will get upset because what you reasoned mentally doesn't feel right. You would be stuck in a pool of frustration that could have been prevented if you would have accepted what soul you was communicating and let that aspect of self guide you, ego self, in the right direction, the direction that is in your highest and greatest good. Allow yourself to start breaking free from the conditioning you received from others so you can stop struggling internally. Allow the weight from all the conditioning to be lifted from your system so that you may condition your own mind with your own truth. A note about quote-unquote disorders. Mental illness. As someone who has spontaneous OBEs, nothing is wrong with you. You are simply experiencing a very expanded awareness of your true self. Your natural human state of being includes perceiving with non-physical senses. Those senses were suppressed in many ways by those who run this system, but now they're starting to turn back on. Yes, I am very much aware that some people need mental health help, But there are indeed many people who have been misdiagnosed due to the experts not understanding their patient's multidimensional nature. The system doesn't teach us about different dimensions and multiple planes of Earth. So, when people start having spontaneous out-of-body experiences, they're stuck thinking something is wrong with them when they're just fine. People with a true mental illness usually have experienced an extreme form of trauma, causing an aspect of themselves within this reality to disassociate with this world for comfort. This was the case with my father. My dad was diagnosed with manic depression back before the name was changed to bipolar disorder in the early 80s, and he had it in the worst way. He was trapped in his mind. When he was in his manic state, his consciousness was lost in other realms. For example, it would be 1987 in Virginia, and he would think he was in the 1960s in Florida, where he was originally from. His answers to who was president was wrong for 1987, but right for 1960-something. Beyond the time travel, he would do things like throw things through the window back when the old windows were single pane, injuring himself with cuts on his hands and arms. He didn't even seem to feel the pain. Here's other things he would do. Yell and move his arms around as if he were trying to swat away something that was attacking him. Talk and joke around with people that weren't physically there. Play dead. Me and my mother would have to literally drag his body to the car for trips to the psychiatrist. Say things that made absolutely no sense at all, talking out of his head, and so much more. And that was just when he was in his manic state. There was a whole slew of other things that happened when he was in a depressed state. He transitioned in 2004, and I often think that if I knew then what I know now about other realms and heightened non-physical senses, I probably could have helped him in some way. I then quickly remind myself that he was too far gone for me to help. He had severe trauma from his past to deal with where he needed professional mental health help. The problem, though, is that prior to the 21st century, you didn't really hear about mental health experts who were also mystics. Today, there are psychologists and other types of therapists who are also very much in tune with their psychic abilities. They're able to help their patients on a level that goes far beyond traditional psychology or psychiatric training. On top of that, these types of mental health experts are not like the ones that are quick to give a person a diagnosis just because that person can see, hear, feel, and interact with other realities. Instead, psychics in the mental health field know that these realms exist and have discernment when it comes to whether or not a person has a true mental illness. ADHD. So many people have been diagnosed with ADHD, and then there are those who attempt to self-diagnose due to being easily distracted and unable to focus. But here's the thing. When you're sensitive to energy, like many people who have out-of-body experiences are, your non-physical senses will pick up on multiple unseen frequencies. If you were to watch TV and turn on a radio at the same time that you're listening to someone talk on the phone, that would be distracting. Now imagine those devices are invisible. You don't hear or see them, but your mind still picks up on the frequencies they emit. It wouldn't be on the same level as your physical eyes and ears picking up on it, but there would still be a subtle distraction. That's not a disorder. That's you being in tune with higher aspects of self. You're able to pick up on frequencies coming from people, places, and things that you don't see, including frequencies emanating from people in this reality. You have a more expanded awareness than the system wants you to have, so they say you have a disorder. They know you're functioning at an expanded human level, but want you to think otherwise, so they don't teach you about the senses you have beyond the 5 physical ones. When an individual's non-physical senses start turning on, the system will provide you with substances that shut down your abilities. They do this under the guise of medicine that will help you stay focused. The so-called medicine works because it turns off your non-physical senses as long as you keep taking it. If we lived within a benevolent system, it would lift you up by telling you how to manage your abilities and integrate all your senses in a high-performing way so you can focus instead of doing things to shut parts of you down. All senses, both physical and non-physical, would be in harmony with each other. But if they did that, those that run the system wouldn't be able to have control over the mind of the masses, which they work hard to keep in place. Dyslexia. English is a scrambled and incomplete language that is not in harmony with nature and natural sound frequencies. There's nothing organic about it, and this is the case with many modern languages. We give the words and ways of writing them power based on how we have collectively agreed upon doing so. Consider this. People with dyslexia may be flipping letters and mixing words due to the ability of reading codes that are not of this world. If the parts of your brain that deal with language have been programmed by an aspect of the mind that's more in harmony with an ancient form of language expression, then your brain could naturally reverse the scramble back into a harmonious state, something this world is not used to. So, when you're tapped into a more organic way of processing information, certain things may not compute while reading the letters of a scrambled, disharmonious language. In this case, dyslexia is not a disorder. The brain is simply more in tune with an organic way of processing certain frequencies. The key for people with dyslexia is to learn how to process a scrambled language, such as English, in a way where their brain makes sense of it. And many people have accomplished this with practice. Remember, there was a time during matriarchal rule where language as we know of it today did not exist. People didn't need to communicate in written form. Telepathy was, and still is, more natural and faster. Also keep in mind that when written communication came into existence, it was mostly pictorial. It matched the shape of something in nature. English is none of that. It's convoluted, and that was done by design. Section 6. What it really means to be true to yourself beyond the ego. Are you in full awareness of yourself enough to be true to yourself? Often, when some people think they're being true to themselves or keeping it real, they're actually being true to the ego aspect of themselves and keeping it real from the ego's point of view. That's because they think they know themselves when in actuality, the ego aspect of themselves is what they know, as far as awareness, and not the soul aspect. Not being in full awareness of who and what the self is in the word yourself is another primary cause of mental and emotional traps. Your soul is the real you, as I've stated many times, and the ego is the you that you think you are. The ego is the part of you that has developed and matured based on what you've been taught to believe in this lifetime. It's the part that allows your emotions to get the best of you and your mind to overanalyze things. When you allow yourself to be guided by the soul, the heart and mind begin to work together. There's no conflict. There's harmony, understanding, and all-knowing. When you look at things from the soul's perspective, you don't perceive situations as good or bad. You simply look at them as an experience. But don't get it twisted. You still want a pleasant experience versus an unpleasant one. The ego you manages your physical body, but does not manage the soul you. The ego is linked to the physical body and is the part of your mind that has been conditioned by society. This conditioned mind formed a personality that you associate as being you, but this you is really an illusionary you. You are a soul, and the physical body is the vessel that the soul you uses to navigate this physical world. Many people have been taught that the ego is a negative thing and that you should let go of it. I agree with the let go part, but I want to be clear on what I personally mean by let go. First, the ego is not negative unless it allows what we perceive as negativity to influence it. You, as your ego self, have the free will to choose what influences you and what does not. From my perspective, to let go of the ego is to let go of the part of you that has been conditioned by society's programming and allow that part of you to surrender to your soul self. In essence, You're allowing soul to recondition or reprogram ego to view from a broader perspective, the soul perspective. Since ego manages and identifies with the physical body, it does not go away. It can simply allow soul to have control over your body and mind through it. You definitely want to pay attention to ego because it knows the ways of this world. It's also about how you allow your ego self to be conditioned, and the way I'm sharing with you is through harmony. Let go of the conditioning from others and merge ego with soul while simultaneously allowing ego to receive a more holistic conditioning of physical and non-physical truth. So parts of soul are contributing to a holistic conditioning for the ego while you allow the ego to still be, fully experience the ways of this world. Another way of looking at this, for those who are familiar with the primary chakras, is to not just acknowledge your higher chakras, give your lower chakras attention too. Allow them all to be in alignment with each other. It's all about harmony and synchronization, not this or that. By now you get that you don't have a soul. You, the real you, are a soul. When you, as soul, transition out of this reality, you continue to live on in a different existence like you, as soul, are currently doing right now. It's the ego you that needs to become aware of that while you, as soul, are still permeating a human body. And yes, you are permeating the body as opposed to being fully in it. Also, the memory of who you were as ego, personality, human self always remains as part of soul. So even though the conditioned mind is gone, the memory of it remains since soul contains the collection of memories of spirit's experiences. When it comes to soul, there's no difference between life and death. It's just a different experience in that you no longer have a physical body in this world and a society-conditioned mind that distracts you from being consciously aware of things outside of this physical world. Just because one aspect of you is not aware of something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. There are always other aspects of you that are in full awareness of that something. The key is to become aware of that aspect of you that has a broader awareness of everything else. There are many things that your physical body, being controlled by the societal conditioned mind version of ego, is not aware of until the ego expands its awareness of the soul. In other words, you don't really know who you are until you become aware of your soul self. The soul self is the non-physical you that is the collection of all the yous that you have ever been. You as soul are the memory of all the ways in which the individual self has been expressed. And the individual self is part of the one self. You as soul are only one aspect of a bigger, non-individualized whole soul made up of spirit, which many call God. So, if God were a circle, you would be an area somewhere within that big circle. You are part of the very source that created you. All souls are part of the one, self, creator, the all, the divine, source. Another way of saying this is, you are in God and God is in you. God created you from self. What I'm saying is this: in order for you to have been created, God had to use parts of self because God, self, creator, source, or the noun you prefer to use, is all that there is. There's nothing outside of God because everything is God. Therefore, you are God. Side note, at this point in this book, things are either sounding extremely redundant and you're wondering why I continue to say the same underlying message a different way over and over again in multiple sections, or something just clicked for you in the last few paragraphs. If things are sounding redundant, then that simply means that you get it without the multiple ways of saying it. However, it may take longer for some listeners to get it, or they may only get it when it's said a certain way. I'm not making any assumptions on the way in which a listener comprehends the information shared here, so I'm conveying the main underlying point in all the ways I know how to say it. With that said, I suggest you keep listening to the end. You're almost there, because there are additional points to make that I haven't mentioned yet. An important point about the word God. Before God, there was goddess and all the other words that represent the divine feminine or womb energy. We knew this back when we lived in a matriarchal society for hundreds of thousands of years before that part of our being was suppressed. We as humans like to put things in little male and female boxes, but the source from which we come from is neither. You can also look at source as both, which is an androgynous consciousness. Androgyny has more of what we call female than male energy. It's not a 50-50 split. Keep in mind, this has nothing to do with gender. In this context, these words are just used to describe aspects of energy that have been broken down to be understood third-dimensionally. Let me explain by using the pound cake analogy. The ingredients that make up a pound cake consist of flour, milk, eggs, butter, sugar, baking powder or baking soda, and flavoring. There is more flour and sugar than anything else. Since flour and sugar are the primary ingredients, you can look at a pound cake as a flour-sugar mixture. If there were equal parts of all the ingredients, it would not be a cake. It would be an inedible hot mess. That said, a cake is not a cake with just flour and sugar. The other ingredients are incredibly important for the flour-sugar mix to become a cake. This is the simplest way I can think of at the moment to explain Creator, our divine essence. The feminine part is like the flour and sugar that make up the cake. They're equivalent to the primary parts of Source. All the other cake ingredients are equivalent to the masculine aspect that supports the primary. Those other ingredients are what turn the flour and sugar into a mix that causes them to shift and express in a different way. Just as a cake needs both primary and secondary ingredients, the divine consists of different aspects that allow for it to express itself in multiple ways. The full expression of Source is what is known as light, even though light is within darkness before it is expressed. From the dark womb, feminine perspective, light is not yet expressing. Once light expresses itself, that is a more masculine way of being. The process goes from potential, feminine, to expression, masculine. Darkness, womb, feminine, sound, vibration, gave birth to light, intellect, masculine, knowledge. When this world became patriarchal and the feminine, dark womb essence was suppressed, the words used to describe Source were words that represent the masculine aspect, light. This includes the word God. Remember, dark is not negative. Side note, the only reason why I use God as one of the examples to describe Source instead of goddess is because many people listening to this are not accustomed to using the word goddess. Many who are familiar with the word tend to think that goddess is a creation of God instead of looking at both aspects of Source being one and the same. I will continue to use the word God instead of goddess throughout this book so that we are all on the same page with the specific points I'm making. This will prevent people from getting distracted by a word that they are not used to using as an umbrella term. That said, always remember that the indoctrination of patriarchal rule has distorted what goddess truly is, the primary element that makes up our divine essence and source from which everything is, was, and always will be. It is womb energy, which all is birthed from. Let's move on. Most people use the word God as a noun, but truly, God is a state of being, the most supreme state of consciousness, the most supreme state of existence that has been expressed in many forms. When you call upon God, pray, you are in essence invoking an aspect of self, divine source. That's why you see multiple deities in many ancient religions and spiritual beliefs. Each deity represents an aspect of the divine, and people call upon the aspect that's most appropriate for whatever it is they want to accomplish. The practitioners are acknowledging different aspects of one divine source. Here's an analogy that I like to use. Your physical body is comprised of many parts. If you want to open a door, Your brain sends a signal to your shoulders, arm, hands, and fingers to accomplish this goal. Your arm reaches out so that your hand can touch the doorknob, then your fingers grip the doorknob, and all of those parts work together to twist the doorknob and pull the door open. Each individual part is an aspect of the whole body. All is part of one. There are many beings that are harmful and hateful, both physical and non-physical, that call themselves God, just as there are loving beings that use that term too, and rightfully so. Some people invoke or call upon nefarious forces, lower aspects of self, and some people invoke or call upon loving, helpful forces. Remember, the forces of energy that's invoked are coming from within them, because they're part of the essence of all that there is. As for the noun God, they are that too, because they, we, us, and everything that is, was, and always will be is made up of source energy. Regardless of whether you use the word God as a verb or a noun, you're part of that source. So, if you ever hear someone say that they are God, they're not being blasphemous. They're simply telling the truth. They are God, and so are you. The lie is when beings have pretended to be the one and only God instead of acknowledging that we all collectively are God when it comes to our essence. It's not about who or what is God. It's about is the being or entity expressing God consciousness. But really, God is. There's nothing that comes after that. God existed and always has before anything forms or is. So God is. There's only one source from which everything comes from and is, but there are many lowercase g gods if you look at it from the perspective that everything is made up of source energy. It's just that those things are not always expressing from God-level consciousness to be called capital G God. Yet, regardless of consciousness, they are always lowercase g God. The points I'm sharing with you about the word God takes a different level of consciousness for some people to understand it without getting offended from a religious standpoint. This is why I personally prefer to use the term self, creator, source, the divine, or even spirit when talking about the source from which we all come from and are an extension of. However, when I'm speaking to people who prefer to use the word God to mean the source from which everything comes from, or the almighty source of us all, or simply the all, I do use the word God interchangeably with self or creator to reduce confusion. I do this because I realize that sometimes you have to speak the language of the people you're communicating with in order to be understood, which includes using words in the way that they perceive the meaning or in the same context that they're more familiar with. There's no right or wrong way to perceive the word God, lowercase g God, uppercase g God, or God as an acronym, because words and their meanings are not universal. Only sounds, numbers, and frequencies are. Certain words and phrases mean different things to different people. Labels and titles have caused many disagreements between people simply because each person's definition of the label or title was different. Also, most people are not aware of or even care about the etymology or origin of the words they use. As a society, it's important that we ask people what they mean when they say certain things instead of assuming that they define terms the same way that we do. By doing this, we can communicate with each other in a more harmonious way, which will result in less arguments that were just misunderstandings. As I've stated previously, the English language is an incomplete language, and it leaves many words up to personal interpretation. If you look up the definition of some words, there are gray areas. Most words are not absolute in their meaning. An example of this is the many words in the dictionary that have multiple subsections to define what it means when it's used in a sentence a certain way. Also, many words do not mean the same thing that they did in earlier centuries within this reality. So who really determines what something means? You and your intentions are the primary determining factor. However, it's important to be aware of the way in which another person defines a word, especially when their definition is based on the collective conscience agreement of a word within a particular culture. But again, that agreement of the collective consciousness changes over time. Something else to consider beyond what I just mentioned is the following. Even with etymology, the meaning of the origin or root word is not based on vibration. It's based on the meaning that was given to it by whomever created that root word for the overall language it belongs to. Empty languages, like English, require intent. When there are multiple meanings to a word, your intent is more powerful than the word itself. Sound gives off a vibration. So when you say a word, the vibration of it causes something to happen. It shifts reality in some way. Whatever the effect is the true meaning of the word. So what effect does the sound of a particular word have in this reality? If you don't know the answer to that while saying a word, then make sure your intentions are clear in your mind when you say the word. Transformation process. Start the process of expanding your awareness of your soul self so that you can see the bigger picture of all aspects of life and have a more informed point of view. That is being true to yourself, yourself. So how do you start expanding your awareness of your soul self? Some say go within. But then that leads to this question. What does that mean and how do you do it? To answer that, some say meditate. But how do you meditate properly? Many people don't fully explain the going within part, so that's left to individual interpretation. One of the things that bothered me earlier during my spiritual journey was getting answers like go within and meditate without being taught how to do these things. I know how frustrating it can be to talk to spiritual people who use terms that may be foreign to you and then are very vague on what they mean or how to go about doing it. As for meditation, that word has become very popular now here in the 21st century, but many people just think of it as a way to relax and feel good. It has become so commercialized and watered down, just like yoga, that many people are not aware of the mystical nature of it. Sacred and ancient mystical teachings are thrown in some sort of Western world feel-good exercise box, and people don't know what they're truly tapping into in the way that those in the eastern part of this world are aware of. For those who know, many are making it more complicated than it needs to be, such as the teachers that have people think that they must do things a particular way to get results. You must breathe this particular way or that particular way. I say, no, you don't. You must sit or lay this particular way or that particular way. I say, no, you don't. You must chant this particular word or that particular word. I say, no, you don't. If you prefer to do the above, then do it. If you don't want to do the above and you still want to get in a meditative state, you most certainly can. There's no one way to do certain things in life. There are many ways to accomplish many things. What's important is that you find your flow and what works best for you. When it comes to meditation, like with many other concepts and words, as I've said before, people define it differently. There are ways of meditating that you may not even think is considered meditating, but it all goes back to how you define things. For me, meditation is the practice of tapping into an aspect of self that allows you to observe and experience existence from a more expanded point of view. The goal of meditation is to merge with your higher self or become one with your essence. When you're in a meditative state, you are indeed observing and experiencing life from a more expanded, non-physical point of view, and there are different layers to that depending on how deep you go within towards your essence. Which leads back to this. What does it mean to go within? To answer that, take a look at the green circles below, which are also on the cover of this book. The first thing the circles represent are portals, green portals that have appeared to me before entering into other realities. The portals haven't appeared to me in this physical reality, They appear when my eyes are closed and I reach a certain level of consciousness. Basically, it's during the power up and take off phases of interdimensional travel where I'm aware of myself in this reality and also aware of this in-between type of dark place with green light portals in the distance. Also, the portals are not as perfectly round as what you see here. What I actually see looks more like the world fingerprint. However, the above image is still a good representation of those portals. Note, I do not always see green portals before going into other realities, but I want to point out that they do exist. So do white portals and multicolored straight line portals. If you ever see them, don't be afraid. You're just going to go for a little ride. The second thing the circles within circles represent is the multiple layers of the self. Think of the black middle as self and outer rings as each expression of self. The last ring represents the human self. So in between the center self and the human self, you have multiple layers, and each layer is further and further away from the center self. As humans in this reality, we tend to look everywhere in that outer ring for answers to everything, as if that's the only ring that exists. Then some of us create rings outside of that outer ring and encourage the rest of us to look to those additional outer rings for answers. When you turn around and allow yourself to be aware of the inner rings, you're in essence going within for answers. You're expanding your awareness inward as opposed to outward to the center of self, the center that is the essence of all creation. The closer you get to the center, the more truth is revealed due to being aware of more layers that exist and allowing yourself to perceive from those layers. Every time you go inward, you're able to view life from a broader perspective because each inner layer allows for you to see the outer layers that come after it. Therefore, you are viewing from a higher perspective. For example, if you're viewing life from the third ring out from the center of self, you can see the third through the seventh layer and any additional layers created after that. However, if you're viewing life from the sixth layer out from the center, you would only be able to see the sixth and the seventh layer and any additional layers created after that. Side note, those rings, circles, layers are not limited to 7, so please don't interpret the image as me saying that there are only 7 ways in which self has expressed. There are no limits to creation, therefore, the true number is infinite. What I realized during my spiritual journey is that I was already going within and meditating throughout my life without even knowing it. The experiences I've had throughout my life in other dimensions and planes happened naturally. I never willfully or consciously attempted to make it happen. I was trying to figure out why they were happening, not how to make it happen. And yes, I now know the why, and I took it upon myself to study myself to see how it was happening so that I could share with others. What I began doing was observing myself when it came to what my physical body was doing right before I had these experiences. I most certainly was not doing all the things that today's spiritual teachers teach their students or initiates when it comes to having mystical and multidimensional experiences. I get into meditative states without all the extra rituals, visualization techniques, and the structured way that's taught to people, and so do you. Your out-of-body experiences are organic and spontaneous. You're able to do things that many in this world either go through certain mental processes or breathing techniques to make it happen, or use external tools like plants, psychedelics, music, sound frequencies, crystals, etc. You're literally, quote-unquote, meditating when you have your OBEs. Just because you're not sitting cross-legged or in a chair chanting Om, etc., doesn't mean you're not meditating. That's why I don't force myself to willfully meditate every single day like some people. If I had a juicy OBE this morning, that was my meditation. Spirituality or mysticism wasn't meant to be compartmentalized and broken down into little boxes with labels by a small group of people who decide what something is, how to define it, or how to use it. Mainly because There are multiple ways to accomplish something. Many things in life are more gray than black and white, they overlap. Everyone perceives things differently. If you use logic to understand spirituality or mysticism, you'll miss the whole point. Labels cause confusion because people define them based on their own personal experiences. So, the best way I've found to explain how to go within and get to know your soul self is to simply share the experience of it, describing exactly what was experienced and how I was able to experience it without defining it or giving it a specific name like meditate. Always remember this. Your OBEs within themselves is a form of going within. As you continue to wake up and be more in tune with your essence, you don't have to try so hard to do things like meditate or other forms of getting into an altered state of consciousness. It will just happen. The key is to learn how to manage it. Section 7. Unlocking Inner Wisdom. The limitations of focusing solely on academic degrees. How much value does a college degree truly hold? Of course, the answer to that question depends on who you ask. But consider what a degree really is. A piece of paper proving that you've been thoroughly taught and have passed tests that evaluate your knowledge of other people's perspectives on how things work or how things should be. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with pursuing a degree, because all knowledge is valuable regardless of how you attained it. What I am saying is that if a person's pursuit and later attainment of a degree is how they determine their level of knowledge in this reality, then they're limiting their ability to attain wisdom. Wisdom is not gained from looking at things one way. Wisdom is applied knowledge that is gained from the totality of experiences. Consider this. Everything that people have been taught to do in this world has been passed down from a teacher's teacher all the way back to the original teacher of the way in which to do something. Then other people praise that way of doing it, and the next thing you know, there are classes being taught on that way. This led to schools, which led to certifications, and then the culmination of multiple classes leading to the ultimate quote-unquote proof of knowledge, a degree. So if a person only focused on getting a degree, they limited themselves to only one way in which to express an idea. Furthermore, if we trace the way something is done back to the original teacher, where did that teacher get their information from since they didn't have someone teaching them? They got it from within. Whether experientially or intuitively, they tapped into their essence as opposed to looking for an outside source. So ultimately, school taught you discoveries that were made by people who have tapped into their essence, something you could have done yourself, and it's not too late. But some may say, since someone has already made the discovery, why would I need to tap into my essence? I would just learn from people that teach their way of doing it. To that I say this. 1, as stated before, everyone perceives differently, and the way in which that perception is interpreted is different as well. 2, when information is passed down from generation to generation, there may be an alteration of the information from the original source, even if it wasn't intentional. Remember the telephone game when you were a child? All the children sat in a circle, and a message was started by one child, and then the child would whisper in the ear of the child sitting next to them. The message was passed on from child to child until the last child stood up and repeated the message. How many times was what the last child said the same as the original message? Hardly ever. See my point? As for information that has been passed down through written text instead of oral tradition, that may be unintentionally altered as well. There's mistranslation, coded messages, and figure of speech and slang that differ or simply didn't exist as it did in the originator's time period. And of course, there are those who have intentionally altered information for various reasons. They hid the complete knowledge and only passed on a degree of the whole. 3, to only focus on that one way of doing something, you miss the opportunity to become aware of other ways that may be more efficient or complete. There have been many times in this reality where people have thought that something was impossible until someone came along and discovered a way. There have been people who were able to heal themselves or their children in ways in which highly decorated doctors couldn't understand how it was even possible to do so. The word society likes to use in cases like this is miracle. People think it's a miracle when someone does something that the person who was certified to do it couldn't do or figure out. However, it's just simply that a person is using inner knowledge. They're using divine guidance to achieve a result instead of relying on the people who just follow another person's perspective and limit their thinking to what they were taught in school. We live in a society where many people are followers, so they put a higher value on what someone else is teaching than on their own self-knowledge. As stated before, your own inner knowledge and how you perceive the world and how things work in it is of more value than another person's opinion or theory. It's important to remember that you are born full of knowledge that's waiting for you to tap into it. The highest aspect of self has more knowledge than any intellectual in this world. There's no need to be intimidated or think that someone with numerous degrees or certifications has all the answers. When you start focusing more on viewing the world from the soul's perspective, your awareness of self will continue to expand to the point where you will begin to see that there are more points of view than most intellectuals in this world could ever fathom. Also, there will be, and already have been, times in your life when the highest part of you leads you to some of these certified people, because the way in which you're best served in that moment is the way in which they have been taught on how to do what you need done. You may have been led to be certified or get several degrees yourself, being that without them, many people would have perceived you as not having enough knowledge of a particular subject. To reach people with that type of mentality, it was necessary for you to get that piece of paper, as that may have been the only way for others to even consider what you were saying and still say as valid. And then, of course, the way in which a particular school teaches a particular subject may have been in your highest and greatest good. So learning that way has been beneficial to the way in which you have contributed your gift to this world. The point is that it's not about the degree. It's about the knowledge gained from the classes you took from that school which earned you that degree, being the type of knowledge that is in alignment with your soul self. But who decides what's necessary for you? The key is to allow yourself to be divinely led, instead of listening to society preach about how one should focus on higher education in the form of going to an academic institution. When you follow divine guidance, you always know without a doubt which way to go. If it was not meant for you to take the college or university route, then you wouldn't waste time, energy, and money on getting something that you didn't need to do whatever it is you're here to do in this lifetime. However, if it was meant for you to go, always remember that there's more to learn than what the school taught you. Tap into your essence to get a more well-rounded view and integrate the knowledge attained from multiple sources. Listen to your higher self, not society. Also keep in mind that the highest part of you communicates in many ways, including through other people. Be aware of the synchronicities and patterns that occur in your life, even the perceived chance meeting with others. The smallest encounter can sometimes make the biggest impact in your life. Section 8. Trust your intuition over the noise. When you first wake up to the realization that there's more to life than what you've been told, you tend to soak up every book and video you can find about spirituality, your purpose, metaphysics, and the nature of reality. The flood of new information provides answers you've been searching a long time for, and you become a knowledge-soaking sponge. It's as if your higher self led you to clues. And then it happens. The rabbit hole of information gets deeper and deeper, and the more you explore, the more conflicting advice you uncover. What once seemed like a clear path becomes a tangled mess of perspectives. Years ago, I discovered that while being divinely guided to profound insights, I needed to strengthen my connection with my higher self to discern the clues meant for me. When being exposed to a flood of information, it's important to absorb what resonates and disregard the rest. Each spark of resonance is like a spark of light coming on inside of you, like a triggered memory. The clues you find in books, videos, social media, and other people ultimately lead you in a circular path back to yourself. It was never about finding the perfect external source. As you train yourself to sense energetic resonance, you learn to trust your inner truth more than advice from others. Next thing you know, more clues will come to you in the form of intuitive messages and informational out-of-body experiences. Intuitive messages are always coming to you, but mental noise may prevent you from receiving them clearly. So, Spirit finds other ways to get your attention, such as the external sources found in this reality. Inspiration from others can be comforting when your emotions feel all over the place, but don't let other people's opinions overshadow what you know to be true within. Confusion is a byproduct of accepting everything you read, see, and hear from others as your truth without checking in with self. Stay grounded in this physical reality while honoring your inner reality. Harmonize the seen and unseen. Sure, you may sometimes seek validation from other people and their body of work when needing extra support. Just don't let this override the clear wisdom that flows from your divine essence. About the author. Most know me as Vernita Sherman, but my full name is Vernita Seahrey Sherman, and I represent 777 and 1111 energy. I'm not into being defined by the things that I like or don't like, what I do or don't do, or what I believe or do not believe. There's really no labels, titles, or adjectives to fully describe me because I don't fit into anyone's box. However, I don't mind using certain describing words to make it easier for people to understand where I'm coming from, but keep in mind that everyone perceives these words differently. For example, if I were to say that I'm a spiritual person and not a religious person, the thought of that means different things to different people. If I say that I'm no longer a Christian, then some people would be calling on the blood of Jesus and saying how the devil is a liar, etc. All I ask is that you have an open mind when you read or hear me say things, because there's always a deeper understanding, really an inner listening, needed to comprehend what I'm communicating. I'm not a superficial person and never have been, but I always do my best to explain my point of view as simply and clearly as I possibly can. Many times I use metaphors as examples to get my point across. In a nutshell, I'm an interdimensional traveler and multidimensional being who was born into this reality as an 80s child, 90s teen, and new millennium adult that adopted the song True to Myself by Eric Benet as my lifetime theme song in this reality. I incarnated here taking on the qualities of a blue planetary night, galactic signature, and according to the 16 personality factors test, Myers-Briggs personality types based on Carl Jung theory, my qualities are of an INFJ. As for astrology, from a 12 zodiac sign perspective, they call me a Gemini, and from a 13 sign perspective, they say I'm a Taurus. Personally, I found that my galactic signature, based on Mayan Olmec cosmology, and my Myers-Briggs personality type are the most accurate. I was different from the very beginning. My nighttime experiences have always been interesting. I had realistic dreams that I could control, and various types of visions were my normal since I was a little girl. As a child, I never used words like lucid dreaming or other extrasensory perception terms because I didn't know those words existed. It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I found out there were words to describe things that I experienced that were outside of the ordinary. When it came to lucid dreaming, I always simply called it controlling my dreams. As for other experiences, I always referred to them as some form of dreaming as well, since I didn't know what else to associate those experiences with at the time. For example, I was dreaming with my eyes open, which were visual transparent projections in my bedroom. I was dreaming as I wake up, which were really visions. I also was seeing things when I was half asleep, which I later found out is scientifically known as hypnagogia and hypnopompia. I was also unintentionally picking up on people's thoughts, sensing the energy of other people, and seeing, hearing, and feeling spirits or apparitions. Those experiences most likely contributed to my overall non-conforming ways, as I've always been a nonconformist, never quite understanding why people try so hard to fit in. Even as a child, I wasn't much of a follower. I've always done what I wanted to do for the most part, even if people perceived me as being weird, crazy, rude, or stupid. Society's words, not mine. I allowed a government job and a Christian upbringing to keep the real me suppressed. In my early 20s, I became a police officer. Having a job that consists of following orders without question was a very weird experience for me. My non-conforming mentality led me to question why I continued to allow myself to be a part of an organization that didn't resonate with my soul. 5 years in, I wanted to leave, but having a secure job and being financially stable caused inner struggle between my heart saying, "Leave now," and my mind believing that it would be crazy to leave a secure job with a guaranteed paycheck and the ability to retire at a young age. After 8.5 years, I let go of what I thought would be the career I would retire from and decided to follow the voice of my soul on a journey into the unknown. The journey wasn't easy, but it has been the most liberating and freeing feeling that I've ever experienced in my life. Actually, the first time I really listened to that inner voice was when I was 14. Back then, I began questioning everything I was taught about life. You see, I was raised in the church and was taught one way to look at life. I was raised to believe that everything you need to know is in the Bible, as it's God's word, and Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light. I accepted this way of thinking until, hold up, let me back up for a moment, because I really want to make a point in saying that I wasn't just raised in the church, United Methodist, by the way. I was very active in my church for the first 18 years of my life. Along with going to regular church service every Sunday, I went to Sunday school, I was an acolyte, usher, a member of the youth choir, participated in programs, I read the scripture on some Sundays and was the liturgist when the youth would take over on fourth Sundays and we would rotate those positions. I did all of that. And at 12, I went through the confirmation process. Oh, and let's not forget, I was baptized as a baby. On top of all that, I went to a private Lutheran school from kindergarten to the 7th grade, and we had church every Wednesday. Also, Bible study was a daily class that students were graded on. So yes, I was heavily indoctrinated into the Christian way of life from the very beginning. But at 14, things started to change. I wanted to know why this was like this and that was like that when it came to numerous things in life. And I was sick and tired of hearing answers like, "That's just the way it is," or "It's in the Bible." It was obvious that the people saying those cliche phrases to me didn't know the answers themselves, so they just repeated what was said to them growing up. I was never satisfied with those answers, so I started searching for the truth by reading and studying the Bible for myself, in order, from Genesis to Revelations. Well, by the time I was halfway through Exodus, I discovered so many contradictions to the point where I became frustrated. My frustration increased when I went to several pastors about the same Bible verses, and all of them gave different answers. That was unacceptable to me. I kept wondering if any of them knew the truth or were they just guessing. Other people I talked to would claim that there were no contradictions and that the Bible is common sense, and then they proceeded to interpret verses based on their personal beliefs, no objective view whatsoever. To further add to my frustration and confusion, the United Methodist Church and the Lutheran Church were different. All Lutherans know the story of Martin Luther and his 95 Theses. but none of that was taught in the United Methodist Church. Also, women couldn't preach from the pulpit in the Lutheran Church, but it was fine in the United Methodist Church. The differences go on and on. The word denomination didn't mean anything to me as a child. I thought all Christians believed the same thing. And when I realized that wasn't the case, I wondered why and which denomination was teaching the truth. 14 years later, in 2008, at the age of 28, I started waking up to universal truth that's not based on any one religion. By the time I was 33, the answers to many of my whys began presenting themselves to me. I became aware of my true self. When you become aware of self, you begin to notice that you are divinely led to the answers to all questions about all aspects of life. With that said, it wasn't until I was around 39 when I came into a much greater realization of many things without confusion, fear, or doubt. Out-of-body experiences and more. By 2019, I had experienced approximately 11 years of mystical experiences that were more intense than ever before in my life. The last 9 of those years consisted of traveling into other realities. Sometimes I could feel myself being in 3 places at one time, including my consciousness entering the bodies of other people I have been in other lifetimes. I was also hearing full conversations in other dimensions, and then sometimes my etheric body or just my consciousness by itself would travel there. Other experiences included seeing symbols appear on my ceiling at night, which triggered aspects of my memory, feeling extremely intense vibrations and beams of light tuning up my physical body as I lie in bed, and so much more to list that would make this section longer than it already is. All of this and more still happens now. I want to also mention that I have experienced the negative side of what can happen as well. Early on, I didn't know anything about protecting myself, so since I had so much fear and anxiety about it all, I most definitely made it easy for negative entities to mess with me. I have experienced my etheric body being pushed, pulled, and tossed around like a rag doll. Shadow beings have attacked me, I've been poked, and something has tried to take over my body. Ultimately, those entities weren't able to prevail, but that didn't mean I wasn't scared. Fear is really an understatement. I was terrified. I had no one to talk to about it and was numb for years. And I didn't just feel that way about the negative things. The harmless stuff, like the vibrations, sounds, voices, buzzing, drilling, swishing, etc., feeling my body drift away, and so much more, scared the hell out of me too. I had no idea what was happening to me, and I shut down. I didn't want to be bothered by anyone. I'm an introvert anyway, but this was on a whole other level of introversion. People had no idea the form of hell I was going through, nor would they understand. I felt like I was living in a horror movie half the time, and it was very hard for me to keep it together. My out-of-body experiences were very intense, and it took years for me to become comfortable with them because I had no one in this world to guide me. I had to figure things out on my own. Eventually, I realized that I really wasn't on my own. My spirit guides, guardians, ancestors, and friends in other planes were there for me the whole time. Once I released anxiety and pushed through the fear, they came into my awareness. I started paying attention to the training I received in other planes via telepathic communication, simulations, having conversations in other realms with people who knew me from other timelines and spaces, and scenarios playing out that I would observe through what's known as in-slide ability. It took so many years to get to the point of comfort with all of this, but now I'm extremely comfortable and at ease with all of it, and I've been that way since around 2019. My experiences are so much fun. As for the negative experiences, I learned how to protect myself and make it so that low vibrational beings run away from me. It all has to do with the power of love and knowing how to use it. My commitment to you. I have made a full commitment to working with people like you who want to manage their spontaneous out-of-body experiences with comfort and ease, even if they feel gripped by fear and anxiety. I do this using the mystical ease method. I'm here to make it easier and faster for you. With guidance and someone to talk to who has created a method for overcoming fear and managing your ability with ease, you'll accomplish in a few months what took me over a decade to do. If you want to have a conversation, schedule a time on my calendar at meetwithvernita.com. If you prefer to just send me a question, go to askvernita.com. May love flow to you, through you, and around you now. So be it, and so it is. Vernita, mysticalrecall.com.